let's take a look at your submissions for the final project drafts part 1. We'll start with Robert. Here we go. Boom. All right. I think it's really good. I like your color choices. That helps a lot, actually. So a couple of minor tweaks I might do here. What I would do is make sure, like, so you have some overlaps here. It's a little bit hard to tell, and then the overlap is a little different there, and then there's a little bit of a gap between these two. So what I might do is kind of like make a creative choice basically. So right now, it just needs to be tightened up a little bit, I think. So you can see almost like your eyes playing tricks on you where they're closer together. It looks like this is on top of this, and then all of a sudden it looks like this is on top of that, and then that, and then here it looks like you know what I mean? So it's like a little bit disjointed. So what I have a couple ideas. What I might do is, if you want the bottom one to look like it's on top, I would make sure when you actually slice this apart, that you kind of keep it in line, if that makes sense. And then you can move each individual top part a couple clicks on its own, and kind of count, or at least optically look so it looks like one even slash kind of. Or if you want to have it go further and further off, either like push it, so if like these two are closer, then this one gets further, that one gets even further, that way, you know what I mean? So it goes, but just make sure that it looks sort of even. And then just kind of make sure that this, where they overlap, that the gap is the same, so that either there's a space, like a slight space in between, or they're perfectly even, or they're a little overlap, but where the overlaps are and how they're a little bit uneven, it kind of like plays with the optics of it a bit. Like if you look at, I think the H in particular, as I'm kind of like doing a magic eye thing, staring past it, the depth here is really good. Like it looks like the top of the H is kind of behind this part. So if you kind of want to match the spacing there, and what I mean is the spacing between the top and the bottom, right? The other thing you could do too is tighten up your gradient a little bit. So if the line on the bottom was like not solid, but more solid than this, you could just start your gradient here and then work your way up there, and then adjust in your gradient, either slider tool or in your palette. But I think overall, really well done. I think just some minor tweaks just to tighten it up. All right. Next up, Nicole. There we go. Leap. So this is a relatively tricky one, actually. It seems like kind of simple on the surface, and then you start doing it, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, so for a few reasons, it's a tricky word to illustrate in general. And it's even sort of trickier because it's only 4 letters, so it doesn't give you a whole lot of room. So potentially my suggestion would be, instead of having the action sort of lines, these action lines here, instead of having them on the L, I would take them off of the L, have the L be sort of more flat. I guess it's kind of really just defining your arch here a little bit more. So I would have the L be like grounded, and then start your ascent and descent with the EAP. And you might even be able to get away with, instead of having an arch, just having the E go up a little bit, and then the A go up a little bit more, and then the P come down, start to come down a little bit, even a little bit lower than the E, if that makes sense. And we could talk about this. We could talk about this too if you have questions. But basically, you could have, your ground here, and even just try, like if the E goes up, I don't know, 10 clicks, and then the A goes up 14 clicks, and then the P goes up, what did I say for this one? 8 clicks. You know what I mean? So it's like in between. So it looks like it's kind of going up and then coming back down, rather than being like perfectly even. I think that's what's kind of this even arc. But I feel like by grounding the L and then having the gradual EAP go up and down, it might be a little bit easier to pull off, but it also might be a little bit more visually effective. And what you could do is even have action lines on the P and the E, or even just have action lines underneath. So if you had like, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you know, as they're coming up. If you have them just going straight up and down. But if you kind of have this curve arced idea, I would also, again, leave this one alone, and I would also kind of arc the motion lines to sort of match this arc as well. So you have like the one sort of overarching arch, I guess. But yeah, I would have that curve match, because I think it's where these are going straight out, especially with the A kind of throws it off. Like the E kind of makes sense. The P makes the most sense visually, because it seems like it's coming down kind of quick. So I think you just need to match that arch with your action lines as well. But again, overall, a great start. I think there's a couple different directions you can go with it, depending on which way you want to tackle that one. All right, Mary. Another really good one. Again, I really like the choice of color. I think it works really well with this project. I think some minor tweaks I might try. You might have to, like, I know it's on a computer, but manually manipulate it a little bit. But what I might try to do is see if you can push, even if you used, you'll have to play with the distort options, maybe even a free transform. But again, you might have to like manually do it, but I might see if you can really, or play around with the effect. I might see if you can really, like, the bottom third of the word be like really wide, like thick letters, and then going down to this like nice thin, you might even start having, really thick, effectively, all right, how do I put this? Effectively have 2 copies of the word shadow, thick, and then you have one, you apply this stretched effect, and then you have another one where you sort of start at the thinnest part of the bottom thick one, if that makes sense. And then you can stretch that one out. So Greg, what I'm saying is I would really be cool if you had like a really thick, heavy, grounded bottom here, and then stretching to that top to really sort of emphasize that like thick to thin shadow cast. Another thing I think that could help too, I feel like there's a slight gradient on this. I can't tell if it's on the background or if it's just on the text. I mean, I could open up the AI file. But I might push that, just slightly push a gradient there, or even transparency a little bit. Play with the transparency, or play with like a gradient, even a gradient to like dark to transparent you can do. Just to sort of push that sort of lightness of the shadow. And then lastly, an idea which may or may not work because the A is tricky. I was going to say if you had shadow in kind of like a, I don't know, like a fun sort of thin, small, almost fragile font casting this giant shadow. I don't know if that would be tricky to pull off or not. Not necessary to pull this off. I think with some tweaks that I said before, I think it's still a great piece. But I think maybe if you wanted to add a little humor, I guess, to have like this, very, very thin, almost delicate looking type word casting this giant shadow. Anyway, excellent work. All right, Aidan. So I like this one as well. Oh, I can't see. I like the effect that you have, and I like what you've done. I think really the sort of only minor thing a couple minor things I might try is I might try playing with a transparency blend, which I can show you. We can look up how to use a blend, but basically if you did a transparency blend from like this being fully white to like whatever your last one is being, like I would go like 10%, it's 10 or 20% opacity just so you can still see it. And then you would basically have this perfect blend of this transparent kind of feeling to give it that depth, to get it like a lot of depth going back. The other thing I might try is I might try less steps. I feel like it gets really cluttered at the top. I don't know if you need all those steps. So I might try to simplify it a little bit and take out a few steps. Again, you can do a blend there to try too. So if you had, your filled white and then your stroke. So if you started with your stroke and then going up to here, even just a move blend, will give you, like, you could do a desired amount of steps. And again, I can show you how to use the blend tool. But I think a couple of different tweaks with this I think playing with the transparency blend and or definitely less depths, but I think either a transparency blend or a gradient blend might work really well to give that a lot of depth and a lot more motion. But I think overall, really well done. Right, Melissa. Boom. There we go. I really like this one as well. This one's fun, quirky, in a good way. Very well illustrated. I like the O monster personally a lot. So I think I know what you're going for here, and I have an idea. I would either get rid of this shadow that you have going and just work with this shadow if you just want to sort of cast that shadow. I think it's a really good effect, but I think having two of them there is a little much. The other idea that I thought you might be going for is if it almost looked like this was cast on the floor and then it hit the wall and went up the wall, kind of. You could easily do that. But what I would do is I would split the word, or even try it. If that wasn't your idea, maybe try this idea. Maybe not. Using your Pathfinder options, what I might do is what you would need to do is select all of this, make it a compound path, and then what you could do is just draw a line before we'll say with this one before you tweak this. So basically you could use your Pathfinder and cut these out so that they're holes rather than white shapes on top of a black shape. Select all of your objects, make it a compound path. And then what you can do is draw a line where you want it to break. So you would go essentially with your pen tool, click once, hold shift, go all the way across, click one more time. And then if you selected all of those and you did your divide, it would just basically cut a line right in between both of these. So you could have the top grouped, the bottom grouped, right? So you could make the bottom group this skewed shadow and then just have that other shadow just top half just standing straight up. So you basically have the top half at the same, so it looks like it's on a corner on a wall. Hopefully that made sense. But I think if that's what you were going for, I would have the word split. So if this was like the wall, again, make that here, then you just really would just move that there and just still have this shadow skew from here to here. Hopefully that all made sense. I feel like that's an odd thing to explain without actually showing somebody. All right, Mary's up next. Bend. I really like this one. There's not a ton I have to say about this. This is a really awesome first attempt. I think the font choice is great. I think the distortions that you did are really well done. I like the multiple iterations to give it that extra depth and that sort of extra bendiness. My only minor suggestions might be maybe like just a light sort of oval shadow. You can use a gradient or even if you did a shadow of the word. But something to sort of ground it a little bit, I think, might be kind of cool. Even if you had one sort of larger oval that was kind of wide but thin, and then just had like a really light gradient underneath, just to give it something to ground so it's just not kind of like floating. Or another thing you could do is do a couple little action lines. So if you had like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like if you had a couple little action lines so it looked like it was kind of like wiggly and bendy at the same time. But really just adding a couple of those little things, like either to ground it or to give it, some kind of extra little sort of something to kind of ground it so it's not so floating. But your actual treatment of the word, I think, worked really, really well. All right, and then lastly, Olivia. I really like this one as well. I think what you're going for is pretty cool. My suggestions would be to make the needle bigger, and I might even have it start here still, but if you basically scaled it from this point, so if you set that as your target for scaling, and then really make that needle like, even if it finished here, so it looked like it was piercing through here, and you can even play around with. If you wanted to use your Pathfinder tool, which I can show you, if you had it look like it went over this one and under that one and through here and under and then over, you can make it look like it's actually pierced through. yeah, so I would definitely play around with the size of that, make that much bigger so you can really tell it's a needle straight off the bat. And then lastly, I don't know, I would use, if you were to do something like this, I might see if you can thicken up the letters slightly, which is easy. You could just do like an offset path, and I can show you again, but do an offset path, and you might have to type in like an 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch just to give it a little thickness. And then again, do another either offset or offset path and either bring it in or out a little bit less, and you could almost make it look like, and then just put make it a stroke rather, and then put a dash line into it, and it almost looks like it would be sewn there. Might be kind of like a fun kind of extra thing to do, or even if you wanted to do it here. But I was assuming like this one was kind of the rough one and these were the finished ones. But it might be kind of cool to have like an actual like sewn effect on the other two letters would be kind of cool. But yeah, I think overall, excellent concept and a great start. I think a really good start for all of these for everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with the next projects.